1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, when Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin were accused of war crimes, the ICC and Interpol offered their hand to be able to step in, but ultimately, the autonomy and jurisdiction of the entire case was left with Israel and Russia. We think that what happens in our situation is that dinaan siya sa bilis, and as a consequence of that, it left the Philippine legal system, the Philippine government, and the Philippine populace confused and uncertain what's happening, because if we're as sovereign as we claim to be, and if our laws and capacities are there for a particular reason, then why aren't we enacting the full levers of that to be able to protect someone who is also our citizen, regardless if he was guilty or not of all of these things? That's a separate issue. We think that this debate is about something else. This debate is not just about the law, as what top half gets into, but it's ultimately about the extent and implications of sovereignty and how this ultimately has a couple of different parameters. Number 1, legislative precedents and how this affects our constitution. Number 2, domestic political stability. And number 3, international perception. A few strategic observations of the round thus far. Number 1, opening government is right, and DPM talks about optics in a one-liner, but lacks the impacting and middle analysis to explain why this is particularly so important. This framing led to opening being largely a deadlock, and we tell you that on both sides, we think that a part of this arrest can be deemed as a violation of sovereignty or not a violation of sovereignty, but it's not necessarily a binary kind of issue, right? Meaning, we're not like moot court lawyers here, we're debaters, we only have 7 minutes, and we tell you that this debate is really about the extent of that and what are the levers of sovereignty that exist outside the judicial system. Opening government says it's a value judgment, that's correct, but we also have to get the other half correctly, right? Meaning, this motion, for instance, is also an actor motion. So it's that usual, it's a value judgment with an embedded actor, or an actor with an embedded judgment. Doesn't particularly matter, but the lens of us looking at this primarily has to be with the Philippine government, and we're going to uniquely tell you what exactly they want. First argument and contribution. Responses will be integrated. What is the interest of the Philippine government, and why exactly is this a violation of sovereignty? A, we have to understand that they want to be able to protect and preserve the Constitution, given that sovereignty is a social construct. It doesn't really mean anything on its own, but the fact that we create a constitution that is actually there to be able to uphold the laws of the land and actually gives the executive branch power to be able to execute it, and also the judicial branch the capacities to be able to arbitrate it and be able to put people accountable, is exactly what it's for. It's meant to be able to preserve an individual and collective social construct to be able to protect particular people, even if they violated the law. This is where the Constitution also creates what we call the criminal justice system. This debate is not about whether he's guilty or not. It's not about us liking him, all of those things. It's even not about whether what he did in the past was good or bad. Probably it's bad, but we think that two wrongs don't make a right, meaning just because this person did bad stuff to people in society doesn't mean we can do bad things to him. Call it what you may, but he is definitely a Filipino citizen, and as a consequence deserves to be tried by the full capacities of our legislative system and not just left in the dust. We think that the second idea here is on the idea of domestic stability, meaning we have to characterize and understand what's truly happening, especially in Davao and in Mindanao, wherein we agree with what opening opposition mentioned. There are a lot of police and people who are very loyal to him, and what we're seeing happen because of this is a lot of infighting and fragmentation between people. Because for once, people actually agree that there's just a lack of transparency and accountability in this whole thing, meaning whether you like Duterte or you don't like him, you're kind of frustrated that we don't know what's happening. It's sort of behind this iron curtain in the Netherlands, and it's just not too proximate. And that's where my POI came in earlier, right? I told you that it is the farthest thing from proximate to our legal system. In fact, it's very distant, and that in and of itself stifles her capacity to be able to investigate and know what's particularly happening, which just makes it super difficult to be able to do things like get facts and information, be able to grant them a lawyer, be able to cover it on the media and be able to see what's happening. And we think that that sounds like small, but it's actually outcome dependent on them telling us the facts of what's truly happening. The fact that we don't have watchdogs on the ground or lawyers to be able to be there in and of itself is a violation of sovereignty. Lastly, third, this whole idea of like international perception, and this is where I actually respond to a lot of what opening opposition gives us, right? Opening opposition talks about how there was a warrant in 2016 and they say it's valid. We think that the first level of response here is that, bro, it's like 9 years ago, meaning it's outdated and it's unlikely to be legally permissible. In fact, the fact of the matter is that there was an alleged release of one in February 2025, but it was unopened and there was definitely a lack of transparency to that particular regard. So ultimately, this is kind of sketchy, and we think that in and of itself, even if there was a...
POI.
Sorry, what? Yeah, okay, go. Go. Okay.
Oh, just continue the speech.
It's okay,
Just one POI.
it's okay, go for it. All good, go, take it. I'll take it.
All right, regardless of whether or not it's a warrant that is standing, the fact that it is still standing, regardless if it's sketch, is something that they acted upon it, even though like there was already prior investigation from 3 years already there.
Yeah, but to the second part of the rebuttal, you also claim that it's valid because like BBM said it so, or whoever said it's valid makes it valid. But we think that BBM or whoever says it's valid is not the head of the entire world, or not the head of the Philippines, or not the head of the judicial branch. Meaning, you can't just override the process that currently happens and curtail those things and play judge, jury, executioner. We think it's precisely because of the fallout between the Dutertes and the Marcoses that actually lead to BBM having a very biased perspective in terms of how these things are being arbitrated, which make it likely to fact that he shouldn't have a degree of involvement there. We should leave it to the court. But the fact that the warrant in itself was rushed makes the entire thing botched, and we think that in and of itself is a violation of sovereignty. We are very proud to stand inside government.